How's it going, everybody? This is the Canadian lad, and today we're going to be discussing the potential plot lines for Thor Love and Thunder. I recently finished reading the entire Mighty Thor comic, where it's all about Jane Foster becoming the Mighty Thor. Taika Waititi, the director of Thor Ragnarok and Thor Love and Thunder, has confirmed at the Comic-Con that Thor 4 will be based on the Mighty Thor comic by Jason Aaron, which was published in 2016. Before we get into the details about how Jane Foster becomes the Almighty Thor, I just want to mention that the movie version of female Thor will be a lot different than the comic book version. And why is that? Keep watching the video and you'll have all your answers by the end. The last time Thor used his hammer was in Norway. I know in Endgame we saw him wielding the Mjolnir and Stormbreaker both at the same time, but it was stolen by Thor himself from the 2013 timeline. And at the end, Captain America had to return the hammer to the exact moment it was taken from. So in the current timeline of the MCU, which is 2024, the Mjolnir does not exist. Hela, the goddess of death, broke it into pieces back in 2017 in Norway. So the last time the Mjolnir ever existed was on Earth, and the broken pieces remained on Earth as well. And what we do know so far is Jane Foster is an astrophysicist who is incredibly smart, intelligent, and has had a very close encounter with one of the Infinity Stones, the Reality Stone. So it's fair to say she knows quite a big deal and possesses the knowledge of how space and alien weaponry work. So how Thor 4 can kickstart the story of Jane Foster is by showing her working behind the scenes, building a new hammer out of the relics of Mjolnir that was left in Norway. So my theory for Jane Foster is as follows. After the events of Avengers Endgame, she comes to know how hard Thor is trying to fight with his PTSD, and yet he gave his all to save the universe. And probably through some research, she also comes to know Thor's hammer was destroyed in Norway, and she now tries to build one herself. Now because she is the one forging the new hammer, after its completion it probably deems her as worthy and gifts her all the powers of Thor, God of Thunder. This can be a logical way of keeping all the characters in the same timeline and still give Jane Foster the powers of the Mighty Thor. Otherwise, now that multiverse is an actual thing in the MCU, they can always write a story based on a completely different universe, where Jane Foster was the Mighty Thor all along. But I doubt they're gonna do that, so I strongly believe this can be a way of introducing Jane Foster as the Mighty Thor in the MCU. In the comics, however, Thor Odin's son loses the ability to wield the hammer and is completely unworthy now. The hammer now sits far away from Thor's ridge in the moon. But an unidentified female character arrived on the moon and lifted the hammer as the inscription on the weapon changed to "Whosoever hold this hammer, if she be worthy, shall possess the power of Thor." This unidentified female is none other than Jane Foster, who asked Heimdall to take her to the hammer's location, so he transported her to the moon. When Jane picked up Mjolnir, she instantly transformed and gained Thor's powers. Jane decided to keep her identity as female Thor a secret, but it drove the original Thor crazy, not knowing who took the control of the hammer. However, slowly as the time goes, Thor finally begins to trust the new female Thor as he realizes she is worthy and deserves to live the hammer. Keep in mind though, Thor still doesn't know the female Thor is Jane Foster herself, because whenever Jane Foster transforms herself into the Mighty Thor, it gifted her a helmet with long blonde hair and a costume that stood as a female equivalent to Thor's iconic look. And because of that helmet and the unique costume, nobody was able to figure out who was the actual person behind the mask. But here's a big twist. Before the gaining new superpowers and becoming the Mighty Thor, Jane Foster was diagnosed with breast cancer and had to go through chemotherapy to treat her cancer. Unfortunately for Jane, each time she transformed into female Thor, there were adverse effects to her health. During the transformation process, the hammer purged all toxins from her body, including the radiation treatment for her cancer. So Jane's condition went from bad to worse, as cancer spread throughout her body. She eventually sought help from Doctor Strange, one of the few people who knew her true identity. He advised her to stop transforming into female Thor, as the next time could kill her. But she eventually takes on the mantle again for one last time in order to save the Asgardians from an imminent danger. And that's where she had to sacrifice her life, revealing her true identity to Thor himself, and he feels terribly bad. Thor and Odin somehow manage to revive Jane Foster and brings her back to life. Jane Foster then convinces Thor and gives him enough confidence that he becomes worthy and the God of Thunder again. you can clearly see the contrast between the comic version and the MCU version of Jane Foster. These are the primary reasons why the MCU version of Mighty Thor will be hugely different than the comic version. All we can say now is it's gonna be massively inspired from the comics but not taken word for word, because 100% comic book accurate Jane Foster would not make any sense if portrayed in a movie because of the way the MCU is right now. So there has to be drastic changes, and that's what Marvel has been doing with all of its characters anyway. And I hope I explained well enough how Marvel could introduce us to the female Thor and also remain loyal to the comics by giving us huge Easter eggs that will make the comic book readers happy as well. If you agree with my theory, please do like this video. If you have a different theory about Jane Foster, do let me know in the comments, and please grab the subscribe button to help me grow more on YouTube. See you lads in the next video.